Joining me now is Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, founder of ImmunityBio and the leader of several other biotech firms, billionaire scientist, as well as the owner of the LA Times. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. There's so much going on with COVID right now, and in the biotech world, we have so much to talk about today. I want to start off with, of course, the COVID vaccine that you're pursuing. I think there's a lot of concern about variants and how they're taking over. We clearly see that now. And just the idea that there is still going to be a need sometime from now after the first wave of vaccinations for vaccines. So fill us in on where you are right now with this vaccine that you're working on.
Yeah, so, I think we've taken the approach that in order to really get rid of this virus, at the end of the day, you need to clear the infected cell, very much like we've taken an approach against cancer. So we developed a vaccine that is addressing T cells as well as the antibodies, and took a vaccine construct that not just put in the S, but the innards of the virus called the nucleocapsid, which is responsible for replication. So our approach was to develop a construct using a second-generation adenovirus as the vector, and as excitingly, develop an oral formulation as well as a liquid formulation. So you have one vaccine, 3 routes of administration, driving hopefully T cells and B cells and clearing the virus.
All right, so we have a different method of delivery now too, and I know that there are others that are looking at this oral. Why pursue that route when we see so many just going for the standard injection?
Well, I think if you look at this, 1 billion people in the developing world will not get the vaccine. And unless we vaccinate the entire planet, we won't get rid of this pandemic, because you'll have ongoing smoldering mutations, especially in the undeveloped world, where people are immune suppressed with HIV, TB. So in order to have the cold chain and have easy global distribution, not only do you need oral, but you need room temperature oral. So the challenge was, how could you take an adenovirus, maintain its stability at room temperature, and have it delivered? And happily or excitingly, we've actually achieved that challenge and tested it with BARDA in our non-human primate studies, where we gave the sub-Q prime an oral boost. And what we were able to find was a complete protection, in the sense that 0 viral replication after the viral challenge following this immunization with this protocol. And that's the protocol we're pursuing now in clinical trials.
I know that definitely the idea of heat stable has always been a challenge for the developing world. So it's nice to see that this round, in the response, we're definitely seeing more of that. But broadly speaking, of course, there's also a lot more energy around new ideas, novel ideas, and biotech in general seems to be really picking up right now. Investors can't get enough of it. It's something that people are trying to learn about. What would you say is different to you now compared to when you started your companies?
Well, I think what's exciting is that I think finally the concepts have caught up with the technology that over the last 10 years we've developed. I sold my 2 companies to Celgene then and Fresenius for the sole purpose of activating the immune system, and went stealth for about a decade. And the first thing we wanted to develop was a natural killer cell, which we consider nature's first responder, and then launched this company called NantQuest, so we can get the off-the-shelf natural killer cell. The second thing we wanted to do was develop a T cell activation, and so we brought on IL-15. And the third thing we wanted to do was bring on an adenovirus that can generate memory. When you integrate these 3, you activate then the entire immune system. And we created the whole genomic sequencing platform so we can identify this thing called the neoepitope. And finally, I think the world has caught up at least to the concept that whole genome sequencing is important to get the neoepitope. The adenovirus has now been made famous because of COVID, and natural killer cells has now come to the fore, and showing that actually checkpoint therapy alone, unfortunately, will only give you very short duration responses. So I think the biotech world, very much like the tech world, it takes time for these concepts to sink in, of these combination therapies with low-dose chemotherapy and having your body being activated, and that's ImmunityBio. which we just launched as a company.
Yeah, you did that, and you did it in sort of a reverse merger, and you usually spin out, or the idea generally for biotechs has always been, the name of game is to spin out or to have, like a large pharma company acquire. But in this case, you let go of the Nant name and decided to make ImmunityBio the lead. What spurred that change?
Well, I created the Nant platform. On the one hand, the Nant Health, in order to create the GPS cancer so that we can actually identify the new epitope. I then launched Nant Quest in order to create the off-the-shelf natural killer cell. So this was 2015 and 2016. So 6 years ago, these two Nant companies. Then I had my final company called Nant Cell. And it became apparent to me that people were getting confused about the words because they were so similar, and what does one company do versus the other. And really what I was trying to do was to try and simplify each of these companies in terms of its own domains. Nant Health, in my world, was to develop what I call the human signal engine, monitor the person remotely, and develop genomic sequencing so we can create precision medicine. Nant Quest was to develop this off-the-shelf natural killer cell, but create a product, not a process. So at Nant Quest, I spent 3 years at risk building huge manufacturing capacity. We now have 400,000 square feet of GMP 2,000-liter scale manufacturing capacity, so that we can cryopreserve these cells and hang them at the bedside. And then Nant Cell, which is now ImmunityBio, was to then orchestrate all of this platform using the adenovirus. But what was key about this adenovirus is that it could be given in the presence of ad immunity. So it's a second generation adenovirus, and we were at 13 phase 1/2 trials. So in Nant Cell, we created this QUILT program, QUILT, which I call quantum oncotherapeutics, because we need to modulate all these and orchestrate. So I was taking a natural killer cell, and I was taking an adenovirus, and I was taking an IL-15. And lo and behold, we were seeing complete remissions in pancreatic cancer, complete remissions in triple-negative breast cancer, complete remissions in bladder cancer, complete remissions in head and neck cancer, complete remissions in Merkel cell cancer. And it became clear then that we were on the right path. And to maybe take away the confusion, now put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so we merged my two companies, of which I was a major shareholder, and allowed the majority of the minority this time to take the vote, and if they wanted this. And we did, and it now is ImmunityBio. We now have a company that I believe has the broadest platform. We have 17 first-in-human molecules, tested already in 1,800 patients, in 40 phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, with 25 phase 2, 3 trials, randomized trials, some of them underway. So that was a sort of coming out party of, okay, this is ImmunityBio.
It's, yeah, definitely a very robust pipeline that you have in the works there with everything put together. But you started off really focused on cancer and a lot of energy put in there, and now have a lot more going on with a focus also on infectious disease. Are you planning to span both going forward, or is infectious disease sort of a call to right now?
It's actually not. So in 2009, we did the H1N1 vaccine, believe it or not, with the adenovirus. We were, before even COVID, in clinical trials with HIV. We are in clinical trials with HIV. Ironically, 2019, literally the month, I think October 2019, 2 months before even COVID was announced, a paper was published on Lassa fever with our adenovirus. So we're deep into using the adenovirus for infectious diseases and IL-15 for HIV. And then COVID hit. So it looks like it was, funnily, in a funny, sad way, as if our company was sort of built organizationally to deal with infectious diseases on one hand and cancer. Because at the end of the day, biologically, I see that as the same biological problem in the human being. Your body either has a cancerous cell, which is bad for you, or you have an infected cell, which is bad for you. And that the system you've been built with, the natural killer cell, the T cell, the B cell, is all being uniformly addressed to actually attack both. And since we have molecules to activate all that system, that's why we're in both diseases.
And when you're looking at this from the perception of being able to, have as many things going on as you do, you have so many newer sort of age therapies that you're working on. The public sort of discussion still is right now, especially for healthcare, a huge focus, especially because of the pandemic, on health equity, on access, on affordability. But there are concerns from employers in recent polls looking at these emerging technologies and the cost that will be associated with them. What are your thoughts on that, on the need to have more affordable healthcare?
I completely understand and have empathy for that, frankly, to the point that I think if you look at you think COVID is bad with regard to infectious disease as a pandemic. In Africa, more people are going to die from cancer. And there are diseases like, cervical cancer, HPV, Burkitt's lymphoma. As Peter Hosu, who was on your show, talks about these neglected tropical diseases that actually cause cancer. So not only do we need to address them for our country, which can afford some of this healthcare, but more importantly, I believe, for the rest of the world, developing countries. So yes, we needed to find a way where these technologies could be scaled at a lower cost. And that's why we took this position that we were going to, from the outset, you can't have $1 million CAR T-cell program going in a bankrupt the family from that. So we had to figure out how to take these processes and create products. And that's what we've done, at least with cell therapy. And then simultaneously, as you add combination therapies, you have to find a way in which these combination therapies can be given at a reasonable cost. On the other hand, however, I think what we're going to do is actually improve quality of life without the toxicities associated with it, without the hospitalizations, without the infectious disease, without the neutropenias and the infections. And that's another way of actually addressing some of these costs.
So definitely we need to keep looking at this avenue then. And then my last question for you is looking back on all that you've done in the last several years. I know that there's been a shift in how you've taken on some of these companies and what you've been doing. You've expanded beyond healthcare into virtual studios and the newspaper industry with the LA Times. I just wonder, you've also been a very controversial figure in all of this. What is the lesson that you think has been learned in how to deal with, say, the financial world and industry that you could maybe pass on to smaller biotechs who are hoping to come up in the world?
Well, I think controversial is the word when people don't understand what we're trying to do. And more importantly, when we're trying to make change. And I'm happy to be controversial when I say that it's wrong that we should be giving people high-dose chemotherapy, actually wiping out the immune system when it's illogical. So we've taken on that multiple areas of industry or people who are actually generating large amounts of revenue, giving high-dose chemotherapy. So that may be controversial and different. And I think why I'm comfortable in my skin about that is to look at the results and have the gratification in my own self when we see patients who are benefiting from that. So that's one. The other is really to truly believe in the science, right? Follow the science. It doesn't mean that everything we take on is going to be correct, but we really just need to be honest with the science as we follow them. And the third thing is really to be curious. So the fact I took on the newspaper like the LA Times, I believe in democracy. And I think if not us who have the resources to actually support organizations that are literally failing because of platforms, and I won't mention the platforms that take away the advertising dollars. But without local community newspapers, I think we lost as a nation. So yes, I do take on some of these challenges, but this has been an American dream that allowed me the opportunity to do so, right? So no, I think, and then with regard to younger people, I'm hopeful the inspiration is as follows: pursue your passion, believe in yourself, and don't get averted by the naysayers, because there will always be naysayers. If you're doing something important, there'll be a naysayer. If you're doing something that really nobody cares about, nobody will care about anyway. So I think it's important for you to pursue your passion.
It's a good attitude to have, certainly, especially when you have to deal with as many different personalities as you do. So, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Julie.